So of course, continuing with our show this morning as we shift that back to another medical topic this morning. And this time we're talking about the anniversary of Belize Medical Associates. It's 30 years. And we're talking as well about the specific topic they've chosen for their medical symposium. Joining us for this conversation, we have Professor Shamir Cawich, who is a specific type of surgeon. It has to do with laparoscopy and specifically dealing with the liver, the pancreas,
and the bile duct.
And bile duct. We also have with us Dr. Marcella, the chairman of the board of Belize Medical Associates. Good morning, gentlemen, and thank you for being here.
Good morning. Pleasure to be here.
Okay, so let's start off with talking about this big anniversary, Doc.
Yeah. Well, you know, we're coming of age, 30 years.
Should be. Right?
Should be. We, Belize Medical Associates began as a medical institution in 1988, 30 years ago. We began in what was then Petrina's Plaza. I don't think you even know that.
No.
You're too young for that. But Petrina's Plaza was on St. Thomas Street. Mr. Cervantes owned it. And it didn't go well as a plaza. It had a concept of a, plaza in Chetumal. And
a Romax Plaza before it was
with
time,
no, yeah, but lot of little rooms.
Like a mall.
Like a mall. That was the concept. And so we took it over, and from a lending institution. And that's where we began our multi-specialty practice. At that time, obviously, there were only 5 of us. That was the amount of specialists that we had in Belize. And coming in from the University of the West Indies, myself, Dr. Cawich, which is Shamir's father, Dr. Goff, and Dr. Castillo, Dr. Greg Castillo, who is now deceased, and Dr. Gonzalez, who was at the University of San Carlos. But we were the specialists of that era. And we thought that it was there was a much need for private care. And so that's how the concept began, as a polyclinic, a specialist clinic, and with the vision to increase it over a period of time, to incorporate the lab, the pharmacy, the imaging, what have you, operating theater, hospital. And so over the period of 30 years, we have brought it from Petrina's Plaza to where it is right now. So we are very proud of it. We over the last 5 years, 4 or 5 years, we began to have symposiums, like every symposium. We bring a international specialist of a recognized person to come to give lectures. And we have 2. We have one to the general public usually, which is tonight, non-medical people, and one tomorrow for the medical people. And so this year we invited Dr. Shamir here when it's really Shamir to me,
Yes. Yeah.
When I was going to medical student, when I was a medical student, he was a little baby, just born, And we are proud of Shamir because unlike his father and myself who have come back into the service and worked, Shamir has gone into the area of academia and has stayed on with university. He did his postgraduate in surgery, and he did more postgraduate in the area of laparoscopy, which is minimal, we call it minimal access surgery, not big cuts but little holes to do surgery. And then he has also specialized in the area of the liver and the pancreas, because you get smaller and smaller in the area and more specialized. And we are proud of Shamir, and so we said, why don't we invite a Belizean? And just recently, this year, last year, he was elevated. He went through the ranks in the academia, junior lecturer, senior lecturer, what have you, and now he's a full-fledged professor of surgery. I think he's the youngest professor from UE in the area of, certainly in medicine.
Is that so?
Yeah.
I think so.
In surgery.
In
surgery, yeah.
Wow.
So we have invited him to come
It's
to
like
celebrate.
going for the full circle. This is 30 years later, one of the children of the founding fathers for the institution returns to be a part of the symposium.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
So
I want to ask, before we move into the
Yes.
symposium though, and before I attempt to say what
Yeah.
your specific field of interest is, the Belize Medical Associates has evolved quite a bit in the past 30 years, obviously. And you've even recently made an even bigger investment in moving into radiology and imagery. Now, most people would say, Dr. Cawich, you know, you've already established a hospital. You know, you were on a good footing, and then you went into another major investment. Why was this a critical area for the country and for what you wanted to offer?
Well, first of all, in terms of space, you know, when we began, we thought Petrini's Plaza would be enough for everything.
Yeah.
And very soon realized that that no goes all. And imaging is the same thing. You know, we began with one ultrasound, one X-ray machine, and obviously there's a lot of improvements in imaging.
Yeah.
It has moved that, you know, the level of ultrasound has gone up to high definition ultrasounds. In terms of imaging, you know, they have moved from the traditional to the digital radiology. In terms of the CAT scans, you know, we had one about 10 years old now, our single slice. We have, you know, moving up, they're up to how much now, Shamir? About
I think they're past 100 now.
about 100 now. You know, so we had to move up because it gives better definition
Of
and
course.
better diagnosis you can get.
Yeah.
And then next year we want to invest in an MRI. That requires more space. So we
Which we
looked at
don't
it.
have in the country yet, do we?
We have a small one, you know,
Okay.
but again, the same thing, basic MRI, you
Okay.
need to move up, you need to step up.
Yeah.
Doc, as we celebrate Medical Associates, it's my hospital. You delivered all of my children, two of them.
Two of them.
And
Yes.
almost all my family's children as well.
Right.
But I wanted to talk about the public sector, private sector divide, because as we
Yes.
celebrate 30 years of our hospital and all the successes and challenges and failures that you've had as a private institution, it's only a small community of doctors. In fact, I know that for a large part, you some have to give service to the public hospitals. Some persons also who do private hospitals also serve in the public sector.
Right.
But as you look forward for 30 years of progress that you've successfully had in the private sector, and you compare that to where our public health
Right.
sector is, how are you feeling? Are you
Well, you know, the public sector is a very important sector. It provides healthcare that is free at the time of access. And, you know, for a private institution, I would say the majority of people go to the public sector. If not initially, you know, the majority. I think the public sector is underfinanced, big time. And it's, as a result of that, they can only be able to provide service up to a certain level. It's very difficult. You know, if they want to invest in an MRI, you know,
where's money gonna come
Yeah.
from?
you know, it's a major investment. You know, how would
How do you recover the cost? Yeah.
right? Well, you can't recover it. So it means that I'm saying that upfront, I think the public healthcare system has been underfinanced. They need major infusion of money to be able to get it to a higher level than where it is now. I think the human resources is there, you know, it's there. But, you know, you need an infusion of capital. You need the management to go with it. And unless we do that, I think, you know, the improvement is going to be very minimal.
Yeah. And I would imagine that what in envisioning a private institution is simply giving people an option.
Right.
An option outside if they don't want to seek public health specifically. Where do you, I mean, managing any business is difficult. Managing a health institution, that does cost quite a bit.
Yeah.
And it's life or death for people when they go in
Right.
sometimes. So what do you credit for your sustainability for 30 years?
Well, I would say that one of it is the prudent investment.
Okay.
We never went to say we're going to borrow 15 million or whatever the amount is, and we're going to build a 100-bed hospital. We began with, actually, and if you remember, but when we began in 1993, we began with a 4-bed hospital. You wouldn't believe it, Shamir. 4 beds. 4 of those I think where Dr. Smith and where the X-ray and QAR is, that was the 4 beds. And then one of those rooms was the operating theater.
Wow.
You know, that's how we began. We utilized the space. And then as we paid off that loan, then we moved on and made another loan to improve
so
our
you
space.
grew based on the demand and also in being
On
able
the pay,
to
on the
recover.
ability to
Yeah.
pay back, you know. So we have always been very prudent for financial sustainability. And the other thing we have done is that we have all the income and the revenue has been put back into the institution. So the shareholders basically get no dividends in that
Wow.
institution. We give them a good place to work, you know. But apart from that, there is no income to come from the shareholders, no. And so we have been able to reinvest everything, and that's why we have been able to grow in that manner.
Yeah. You do work with the Ministry of Health, though, with your primary health clinic, right?
Yes, that is it's a what we call a contract we have with the National Health Insurance.
Yeah.
We have one of the contracts with them. There are 4 polyclinics in Belize City that do work for NHI, and we are one of them. It's not managed by the Ministry of Health, actually. It's managed by the National Health Insurance.
Through Social Security.
Through
Board,
Social
yeah.
Security. They work under Social Security. And they have certain standards that they want at the primary care level in terms of the infrastructure, in terms of the patient flow, in terms of how much patients a doctor can see. They limit you to the 15 minutes per consultation minimum. If you see more than that, and the average, they penalize you. If you see too little bit, they penalize you, which I think is the proper way to go, to have a primary healthcare clinic that is monitored, that is staffed, and then the amount of labs and amount of pharmaceuticals you can order is within a list, you know, and you always have to have 100% of that. So the people who go there get, you know, basic services, but they know that it's available and they don't have to pay much for it. I think they pay 10% of the cost of it, you know, and the NHI pays the other 90%.
So that's barely scratching the surface of what you've been able to do in 30 years. But I do want to shift to the symposium and talk about your own career. So it's Professor Dr. Shamir Cawich, and it's laparoscopic hepatopancreatobiliary surgeon.
Good job.
There
You hit it.
I wanted to
nail on the
challenge
head.
myself, but really, which is liver,
Yes.
pancreatic, obviously, for pancreas, and biliary for your biliary duct.
You're brave, Marlene.
But you
I
got
love
the
challenge-
medicine.
I love challenges. But Professor, tell us, you know, about your own background. So obviously you had the introduction as baby Shamir running around.
Yes, you're taking me way back.
And what it's like with your own accomplishments and coming back and sharing that.
Yes, well, as Marcelo said, I grew up around these gentlemen, and I was able to see them and always held them in very high regard. They were actually my heroes growing up. And eventually when I left Belize and went to the University of the West Indies, this time to study medicine, I was amazed because, I mean, everywhere I go, I would go to the gynecology department, and everybody said, well, do you know Marcelo Cawich? You go to medicine, you go to surgery, and there was always a footprint there. And I always thought that was amazing. So I went through the university, through undergraduate, postgraduate studies, and eventually decided to stay on in academics.
Why that not move into medicine? Into practicing?
I practice as well. Yeah, we practice as well. I am actually teaching surgery.
Okay.
And therefore, to teach surgery, it's not in a classroom, it's in the operating room. So we have to do it and demonstrate. And
And so you decided to follow through with academia.
So I practice and I do academia as well.
And why was that a passion for you?
To be very honest, it was I was always impressed by the people who went ahead of me, and you know how much respect they demanded, you know what they were able to achieve, and I just wanted to follow in their footsteps, and that's what I think I've been doing all along.
One up,
Yeah.
See, I didn't want to say that, right? It's like that, I'll go another level higher, right?
Yeah.
But laparoscopic surgery, which you call minimally invasive, you know,
Yes.
is really, I think, for anybody who dreads surgery or has ever seen an old surgery scar, it's really the new way to go. And tell us a bit about what we now understand and what possibilities are in using this type of surgery.
Okay, well, traditionally, maybe in the mid-1900s, if anyone needed an operation, let's say to remove the appendix, you'd have to make a cut over the area. But if you think about it, this cut would have to be big enough for one of these hands to go in, maybe two sometimes. So you're starting off with a pretty big incision, and then you have to add the hands for the assistants and instruments. You're ending up with a pretty sizable cut just to get down to an area to do whatever it is you want to do. And if you think about it, that cut actually has nothing to do with what you will actually do for surgery. And that adds pain, it adds bleeding, it adds the potential for several different types of complications from the cut itself. Forget surgery. And that's what laparoscopy is all about. Laparoscopy now says, okay, hold on. If we're making this large incision and creating all of this injury to get to something to do an operation, why don't we get rid of these large incisions and make very tiny incisions and do the same thing using small instruments? And that's what laparoscopy is. So laparoscopy is where you use 3 or 4 instruments maybe that are about the size of your little finger. And you put in a camera, you put in some lights inside whatever cavity, and you basically do the same thing you do at open surgery. It makes sense because by avoiding that large incision and all that trauma and bleeding and pain, obviously it will have benefits for the patients. They will recover a lot more quickly, get out of hospital, get back to work. It has tremendous benefits for your society.
Yeah.
And as you said, it is really the way to go. Actually, it is not even new. Laparoscopy was initially started way back in the 70s and 80s.
Oh.
And
They had cameras that tiny from then?
obviously the equipment, just like the imaging that Marcella is talking about, has progressed significantly compared to what it was then. Technology as a whole has advanced. I mean, when I was growing up, there was no cell phone. Now everyone has a smartphone that you can't separate from.
I was telling Dr. earlier, actually the laparoscopic, it was actually begun by a gynecologist in Germany. He began that process. And at university when I went, they were not doing laparoscopic surgery, but the gynecologists were doing laparoscopic tubal ligations.
Okay.
So we were doing
Tile
tubes through the laparoscope, through the navel, no? And we have that in Belize since I came. No?
Yeah.
But the surgeons then took it over and expanded it to almost any organ in the abdomen. Have done very good work.
Yeah.
And I think Shamir also is a specialist in what you call single port. Instead of having those multiple little small holes, it is through one port all the instruments go in. So it's moving it from 4 to 1. No?
I wanted you guys to talk about we're a developing country.
Yes.
That's political jargon to say that we're far behind. We probably can't afford it or just not in a position to be able to take advantage of it. But I wanted to talk about the value of the academic discussion and space. And I'm an attorney, and you get so bogged down with actually providing the service that the space to actually have the conversations, to have the intellectual of medicine developed as in the country is particularly small, very rare. In Trinidad, where you are, there's a university, so there is, by default, some discussion on a formal level. But can you talk to us about the value of having a medical symposium where you actually have academic or intellectual conversations about the development of medicine in Belize? And what does it do for a space?
Well, I think a lot of people have that mentality, as a developing nation, or we're not able to provide standard of care. And as I said, we are involved in teaching, so we go through all the Caribbean countries, and it is amazing. At every country that we provide these training opportunities, that mentality is there. And only when you get in there and show them, hey, this is all mindset. Yeah. When you have the equipment here, when you get, yes, you might not be able to do have all the robots and all the equipment that you'll have at Johns Hopkins, but you can use what you have here and get the same things done. And once people realize that that is a possibility, you'd be surprised how things progress. And that comes not only with exposure, but it comes with education, it comes with being aware of what is out there and essentially keeping on the cutting edge. So I take issue with that. It's not that we're a developing country. It is our mindset, and we can do it.
Yeah.
We can do it. If you look at the entire Caribbean, I would say that yes, there's going to be a wide disparity in the level of healthcare that you can provide in very populous countries like maybe Jamaica or Trinidad, but there's no reason that the less populous countries should be any further behind. We're all one region.
Understood, but in a country where 40% of our population is, medical care is not in a vacuum. It's not in an academic vacuum.
True.
Where you can just access it. You have to have money, and healthcare in Belize is tremendously expensive. Minimum wage is what it is. We have a significant poverty line. So when you're talking about developing countries, the reality of having access to it, because we can have a huge MRI machine, but if our people can't afford it, we're going to die. That's the simple thing. So I was just trying to go back to, I don't know if it's like the law, because the law is a little bit more word-based, it's more idea-based, and medicine is a little bit more practical, I would assume. But I wanted you to talk about the value of just having a symposium, of having a conversation about medicine and where we are going or what we can do, or to get rid of some of the misconceptions. What does it do for Belize as a medical destination and the culture and community of medicine in Belize to have a symposium like this?
Well, as I mentioned, the lecture tonight is for the non-medical persons, and the idea is to bring the awareness of the public that, laparoscopy is available in Belize, and to get the non-medical people, the general public, to realize where we are, what we can do, to have that awareness. And I think that is what we're aiming to tonight. Tomorrow, Shamir is talking about more medical things, about the cancer surgery, using the laparoscope, new things that are coming out to make also now our doctors aware that there are a lot of things that can be done by laparoscopy. And certainly if we don't have the human resources to do it here, then certainly, when you refer, you don't refer blind, refer
Send to Trinidad.
Well, that's kind of far away.
Though, if you rewind to the late 1900s, when laparoscopy was in its infancy, those persons who used to do open surgery used to say, well, this is experiment and this is not correct, and there was a lot of resistance.
Of course.
But it's only when patients and the public, the laymen, became aware and realized, wow, yes, I hear what you're saying, but look, this thing has all its advantages, that they began to demand it of the medical community.
And that was
when
actually the question I wanted to ask. Where you see the greatest resistance in the uptake of using laparoscopy? Is it because sometimes when we're accustomed to doing things a particular way, it works for us.
Changes how.
It's that. That's what it is. And the public may not fully understand, like if you have to do an explorative surgery to figure out what's wrong, like how are 3 small holes going to help you find what's wrong with me versus just opening and seeing, or major surgeries. Where do you see the greater resistance, and how do you overcome it?
Well, there's no need for Belize to reinvent the wheel. The wheel has already been turning throughout the Caribbean. The fact is, and again, at the risk of sounding politically incorrect, the Caribbean as a whole is a little bit behind the developing world and this is no secret. And many of the countries that have gone before us and have developed these minimally invasive procedures have already gone through that. We've already seen where the resistance is. It's in your mindset. It's in the open surgeons having a little bit of resistance. Sometimes patients, even the healthcare administration, there are resistance at every pocket. But we have so many people, not only Belizeans, but Caribbean people who have gone ahead of us and have overcome all these obstacles. So to get right back to your question, awareness is important because we know what is there and we have a goal to strive for, and that's the bottom line.
So let's have a little less medical conversation, right?
Okay.
Is this more cost effective to do, and how so? Versus having a large incision or going the route of laparoscopy, is it more cost effective? And what are the available options that I can be able to get minimally invasive surgery versus open surgery?
Okay, so that's two questions.
Yeah.
The first question is a little complex.
Yeah.
Obviously, with open surgery, you have one large incision. All you need is a knife and some basic tools. And so that's, in terms of cost, relatively cheap.
The procedure is cheaper.
The procedure is cheap. When you talk about minimally invasive surgery, you're talking about a high definition feedback system, a camera controller, camera, and all of these special equipment pieces that you have to use. So the cost of surgery now for minimally invasive surgeries is more expensive. But when you step back and look at the whole thing, the patients who have open surgery will have more pain, they will require more pain medicines, they will stay in hospital
They have to be
longer.
hospitalized.
They will require more visits from doctors and nurses. And when you add up all that costs compared to the person who has the same operation done laparoscopically and goes home and gets back to work the next week, the overall costs are significantly lower than having open surgery.
As well as the risks.
Well, the risks are equivalent. The risks are equivalent. There might be slightly different risks, but the cost certainly in the long term is going to be lower.
Yeah.
And not only that, think about it. Many of the people who are having surgery are going to be young people who are in the workforce, who are potentially productive. You have them laid up for 3 months, recovering from a large open wound. That's your whole society that suffers. While if they go back to work in 3, 4, 5 days, your whole workforce is more productive. So you can see the wider societal benefits are unimaginable.
And now what we're able to do with laparoscopy, from tubal ligation to what now?
So virtually anything that can be done at open surgery can be done laparoscopically.
Okay.
Yes, there are going to be some basic procedures like removing the gallbladder, removing the appendix,
Yeah.
and some complex procedures like removing portions of the liver.
Yeah.
And obviously that requires more equipment, more training, more costs.
Yeah.
But if you talk about the standard of care, virtually everything that can be done at open surgery can be done laparoscopically.
Appendix, taking out your appendix.
Yes, absolutely.
What else would you have to do? I don't know that much about surgeries.
Removing cancers, removing the colon,
Yeah.
removing a portion of the liver, anything.
Cancers where?
Again, cancers can occur in any organ.
Yeah, yeah.
And the majority of these things can be removed through the laparoscope.
Yeah.
I wanted to know, let's say my favorite doctor is Dr. Cooley.
Yeah.
I'm very comfortable with him performing my surgeries. But
You can't do laparoscopy to do cesarean.
But
We should probably clarify that.
I was wondering about the transition because, as Doc was saying, when he was attending and getting his training, it was not something available to his training. How easy it is for some of the more seasoned surgeons, who didn't get the training that you are providing at UA to
Right.
make the transition into this new way of.
And indirectly, you're coming back to your first question about obstacles. And this is because obviously if you've been trained in doing open surgery, you can close your eyes and feel something and say, yes,
I
this
hope they
feels
don't
like
do
a
that.
table. They don't do that, but you have all of these senses available to you, your vision, your touch. All of these things are available at open surgery. But when you do laparoscopic surgery, you're not able to touch something. You're not able to see it in 3 dimensions. You're seeing it in 2 dimensions. And so obviously the skills are not easily transferable. And what that means is if you want to do this right, you got to go back to training.
Yeah.
And you can see how this becomes an obstacle now, because somebody who's used to open surgery and has been doing this for decades, to tell them, well, you need to go back to training to learn this new thing. It's one of the obstacles that exists. But that's basically what is required. It requires a different type of training because it's a different type of skill set.
And as a professor, how often do you see experienced professionals coming back to study or learn laparoscopy?
Often, reasonably
What
often.
percentage of your...
It's not necessarily that they come back to school, but similar to what we're doing here at Medical Associates, they would invite people who have experience in laparoscopy to come down and have a workshop. And not only do we have talks and show videos, but we actually, teach somebody how to operate, which is basically what we're doing at the university, but in a slightly different setting.
Yeah. And now it's a fixed part of your education in surgery?
I would say yes.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Everyone who comes through the University of the West Indies in surgery will have considerable experience in laparoscopy.
Because it's the new way of doing...
It is the new way. of doing it.
The older surgeons, the majority of them don't make the move. Okay, people 50s, 60s, my kind of age group. The younger ones that trained in the traditional, in the 40s, they make the move. We have seen that, and they go back and do their training 6 months, 1 year, because they realize that that's the future. You're not going to do it that way, or get out of the way.
Yeah.
And the newer ones that are now coming out are coming out with those.
Almost standard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Standard.
I wanted, my final question is, this is about a bigger conversation than just laparoscopy.
Yeah.
It's more about medicine and technology.
Yes.
And where we're going. And as you leave off the set, I wanted you to talk about where we are in Belize, from what your observation has been for the time that you've been here, and where you think we need to make the next step. It might not be the next step to have, like in the movies where you scan through and it fixes yourself, because that's not available here.
Yes.
But where do you see us making the next step in terms of technology and medicine in Belize?
Technology has advanced so much in the past 2 decades that we in Belize have the ability, as long as we embrace the technology, to move forward. And I will give you an example to answer your question indirectly. We were speaking about training and the training opportunities that are available. And there are many groups that have been formed that have an interest in training throughout the Caribbean. And one of the things we do, apart from going to different countries to teach people to do laparoscopy, is that we operate through distance. So, for example, I may have a colleague in Barbados who doesn't have, who may know laparoscopy but doesn't know how to resect a piece of the liver laparoscopically, and I can sit down in my office in a different country, and through electronic media, I can say, okay, well, I want you to go a little bit more to the left, a little bit more to the right, and they're able to achieve this. And I think this is one area in which Belize can embrace it. If the practitioners are able to say, okay, well, we are willing to learn, we're willing to work with you, that is one way that Belize can make that leap forward. And again, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's already being done. It's already being done with the equipment that people have here, just like it is in Belize. It's just embracing it that is necessary.
So tell us the message that you'll be leaving with those who visit the symposium today. Today for the non-medical persons.
For the lay people.
Yeah.
Today for the lay people, we just want to let everyone know what is available in terms of the ideal standard of care, what can be done, the benefits, the risk, so that they're fully aware. Because remember, it's only when persons become aware that they begin to demand the correct standard from their healthcare providers. So we want to make them aware. We want to let them know that it's there, and we want to let them know that it's available in the Caribbean and even in Belize. And hopefully, this is only the beginning of a continued relationship, so that the entire Caribbean, Belize included, can move up to that standard of care, and we can get there.
And then what are you sharing with the medical staff tomorrow?
Well, the medical staff is going to be a little bit more detailed conversation about technique.
You use all the jargon we asked you not to use here.
Yes, right? yes. It's about technique. It's actually showing videos of what can be done.
Yeah.
But the message essentially is the same. We want to get that same message across. Public, this is what needs to be done. Physicians, this is what needs to be done. Let's work together to get it done.
And then you're heading.
From your own practice, what's been some latest surgery that you've done that you're really proud of, that you've taken laparoscopy to the next level?
Well, I'm sure
there's one. Yeah.
I'm a liver and pancreatic surgeon.
Yes.
And across the Caribbean, there are only 5 of us.
Yeah.
And that's particularly one of the things that we're proud of. The 5 of us that practice across the Caribbean practice very closely together. And we basically service the entire region doing all of these things laparoscopically.
We're going to extradite you back to Belize at some point in time. You're coming back home.
I don't need to be extradited. I would love to come back home. It would be voluntary.
No, but we can, I think, in the future, get patients that have particular needs, and ask Shamir to come and work with our local surgeons to work together.
Excellent. All right. Anything else happening for the anniversary?
I think our staff have other things, but I'm not in the loop. But I'm sure they're having
bunch of
discounts
and
discounts.
Free this and free that.
Discounts and what have you.
Well, thank you very much for being here and telling us a bit about what people can expect tonight and tomorrow as well. All right, best of
If
luck.
any of the non-medical people who are listening and wish to attend, no,
Yeah.
they can ring the clinic, Belize Medical Associates, and speak to Tamara Vasquez,
Yes.
so she can facilitate them with the invitation, no?
Excellent.
Because there's a certain amount of people that
You
the,
can
so the
accommodate.
Radisson
Yeah.
accommodate.
Yeah.
So it has to go through her to be able to go tonight, no?
All right, fantastic. Thank you
Good.
so much.
Thanks very much for having us.
Thank you. It was a
We're going to
pleasure.
go
Doctors,
ahead now and take our final break, and when we come back, we'll have our wrap-up surgery.